Hi and welcome to the Fussball channel. I'm your host Markus Fjørtoft, and not joined actually by my father here today, but we do have a special guest on the Fussball channel. It is Nick Semaca. Now, after spending nearly 2 decades with McKinsey, he transitioned into the world of sports investment. That entailed him owning the minor league baseball team, the Joliet Slammers, reaching great success with them and establishing them as a community staple. More recently, however, recently-ish, he has ventured into the European football world, first with Leyton Orient and what we built most of our conversation around about the Zweite Bundesliga team, Preußen Münster. Why would he want to invest into that? What does it mean being on a board? What does it mean putting money into a club? What is the vision for a club, and etc.? And so we proceed in talking about the dynamics behind the scene of running a football club. Nick's journey from the business corporate world to the sports boardrooms and the world of sports investment is a fascinating one, and we're thrilled to hear more about his experiences and insights. Welcome to the Fussball channel, Nick.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I guess where I would like to start is you're part of an increasing number of North American investors in European football. And without speaking on behalf of all of them, of course, but what motivated you to get involved with sports European football?
Well, my involvement, my desire to be involvement in sports investment actually started, I would say specifically in about 1984. I was a heck of a lot younger back then. I was actually in graduate school here in Chicago, studying business. And I just came up with this idea. I was a big sports fan. I was a huge baseball fan. And I said, someday I'm going to take all this business knowledge that I'm picking up and I am going to apply it to sports, and I'm going to buy a baseball team. Let's see, 30 years later, I actually, when I was retiring from my day job, I actually did that. And I bought a minor league baseball team outside of Chicago, wound up owning it for 11 years. I sort of viewed it as, the real schooling in how a sports team works. What are the things that matter? What are the things that don't? How do you create a good product? How do you run a sustainable business, et cetera, et cetera? And after doing that for a while, I said, I really would love to do something in football. I am the child of 2 immigrants, 2 refugees to be specific, from Germany and Romania. And so I have a lot of family in both countries, and particularly the Germans are just mad about football. And so I went to my first Bundesliga game when I was 15 years old, and my family was on holiday. When I was a teenager, there was this little club playing down the street from my home. Had these guys named Beckenbauer and Pele and Kinalia and Neeskens playing. So I, as a teenager, grew up in the heyday of the Cosmos, and they literally were about 5 miles from my home. I did 2 years of work in London in the early 90s, back in the very dark post-Heysel days. And so I was a huge football fan. So I figured once I had this thing figured out from the baseball side, I was going to try football. My first investment was an investment at Leyton Orient, who you're probably familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been there for 3+ years or so. We are now in the process of selling our majority stake to a new investor. But I always wanted to do something in Germany. I have family there. I have a cousin who is like a brother to me. And that's what got me into Germany.
And when I was doing research for this as well, it's so extensive in terms of what we can discuss because, we start from you investing and owning a minor league baseball team. You've come into Leyton Orient. You have that English football journey. You have Preußen Münster. You have FC Naples now, USL, which is also a very interesting, very exciting project because USL is evolving in terms of what it can be within the larger football ecosystem. I want to start broad. I'm going to be a bit to the point here, but you took over the Joliet Slammers, correct,
Yes.
in the minor leagues, and they went from a money loser to a money maker, and sold at a comfortable return, is how I paraphrase it.
Yes.
I make this point to highlight the great work they do in terms of turning around from a money loss to a money maker, but also on that aspect of running a club sustainably. Now, it's a stated aim of any ownership group, any investor. We're going to run a club sustainably. We're going to make money off of it. Does investing in football, a sports team, does that make business sense? If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. And so if I'll paraphrase your question
Yeah.
to answer it very clearly. If somebody handed me a list or said, create a list of the 10 best businesses to invest in, football's not on the list.
Hmm.
It just isn't. Um, I got into baseball, I got into sports because I love sports. And I was always intrigued by how much business can you apply to it? And I'll explain that because I think a lot, I could also say a lot of things that will be potentially misinterpreted.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm a huge believer in sustainability. You have to be able look at the history of English football. Look at the number of clubs that sort of ignore the idea of sustainability. They get themselves in a huge trouble. Reading being the latest, and it's not right for the fans. It's not right for all of the partners involved. It's just a horrible situation. So, and I don't think you can run a sustainable club unless you think of it as a business. Now, does that mean you're going to have a profit every year? No, but it means that you're paying attention to the details. One of the things I took out of my baseball experience was the little things add up. This is a business where there's a few people that will write you a big check, for example, for a front of shirt sponsor, for naming rights for your stadium. But mostly it's over the course of a season, tens of thousands of people writing you little checks. So at least figuratively, right? They buy tickets, they buy kits, they buy, a sausage and a beer at the game. And those little things add up. And on the flip side, on the cost side, the little things add up as well. So to me, the concept of sustainability is absolutely crucial. I actually had a very nice return on my baseball club. I don't expect that at Orient in this sale. I don't expect that at Münster. But I do expect us to be using the kinds of disciplines that say we're going to get the best financial outcome we can while ensuring we have a club that isn't threatened by these random issues, that isn't getting wound up, that isn't getting relegated because they couldn't meet licensing requirements. We don't want that, and the fans don't want that. Fans want a degree of consistency, a degree of stability. That's what I think is the most important.
How tough is that though, in when you're dealing with fans and a community at large, which obviously it is a community asset, like you're custodians of the club coming in. I ask because you've been on several board positions and you constantly have to wrestle between spending a pound, dollar, euro, whatever, off it
Mhm.
versus on it, performance based versus long-term strategy based priorities. How do you find that balance within then the context of, well, we want to sign that new striker, we want to have that.
Right.
What are how do those conversations happen in those boardrooms then when you're making plans for these clubs? And I'm aware that it is obviously on a case-to-case basis, so feel free if you want to use a specific example, but how do they generally go down?
So there's actually two different paths.
Hmm.
There's a path that I don't support, and there's a path that I am very excited about. The don't support path is uh, it's the winter window. You might have some injuries on the side. You might have overinflated views of your prospects to to go up in particular. Staying up is a more critical situation, but you make decisions based on emotion. And I always go back to I think it was Will Gregg in the docu-series Sunderland Till I Die.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the management team flopping around and it's all emotion, you I I'm an emotional guy. I hate making decisions based on emotion. What I like to do, the alternative path, is to say, okay, first off, at the start of the season, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Are we trying to win the league? Are we trying to stay up? Are we trying to be where are we trying to go? How much do we want to spend? And then ideally what we're doing, and we do this, I think, very well at Preußen, is say, okay, now that I've got a sense of what we're trying to do, how much we have in our budget, what's the most efficient way to spend that money? And I think that's where clubs that have differentiated themselves, they get really good at it. They take their time to understand the value of a particular player, their fit in their system, the alternatives, really having a game plan on a roster, having a depth chart. At Preußen, I sat down with our sporting director. This was probably 6 months ago, and he had hundreds of names on his chart. He knew if it turned out that we needed a new center back, he knew what the options are way before the need arose. So then at that time, you can make a smart decision. So every boardroom is different. Every club has a different culture. But I'll tell you, the ones that get in trouble are the ones that put too much emotion into it. And the ones that do well are the ones that are deliberate, patient, and make decisions, right? And in sports, the point you make, Marcus, is exactly right. There is so much emotion. I mean, when I go to the ground, I don't sit there and fold my arms and just sit there passively. No, I'm cheering and screaming and crying and doing the things every fan would do because you're so invested in it. But you make those kind of decisions, and sooner or later, and usually sooner, they will lead to huge cock-ups and huge issues that then the fans may say, yes, oh, why don't we, De Bruyne is leaving City. Why don't we sign De Bruyne? They may say that. But if you sign De Bruyne and you don't have the money for it, then all of a sudden you can't pay your staff or some other thing. All of a sudden they're not as happy, right? So you gotta understand where the fans are coming from. You got to understand that the fans are the most important part of the equation. But we can't ride those emotional waves up and down in our decision making. We ride them every Saturday, but we don't ride them in our decision making.
You've mentioned there Preußen Münster, and for context, and the audience will know to a varied degree, but back-to-back promotions in the Zweite Bundesliga as we speak, fighting a relegation battle, which I'm sure will bring out all the emotion in you. But tell me about the vision for Preußen Münster. A new stadium is being built, a capacity from 12 to 20,000. There seems to be a newly injected optimism into the place of which you are no small part. But tell me what the vision you have for Preußen Münster, and I guess we could also within that start with why Preußen Münster as well.
Why Preußen? Actually, when I tell the why Preußen, so first off, every time I go to a match, I've now been involved with the club for, let's see, I mean, this is my third season, right? So I've been around a while, but I live in the U.S. So every time I come back, I'll meet some of the guys that I've gotten to know. We'll usually grab dinner or something, and they'll always ask the same question. Remind me again why you're here. Don't understand. And so I go through the story. And so it all came. So we talked about baseball, we talked about Orient, and then said, it'd be really cool to do something in Germany. And I have, as I mentioned, a first cousin who was like a brother, who was he was an insane Schalke fan. Now he's still a little Schalke fan.
Tough days to be Schalke fan.
Yeah, we were sitting in his garden, and I said, it would be really cool. It'd be really cool if the two of us did something, an investment standpoint, in Germany. And he said, you know what? And I said, okay, well, it would be great to do it somewhere close to where he lives, which is in a small town east of Dortmund. And he said, you know, it would be really cool. There's this club, great history, Rot-Weiss Essen.
Mm.
And they have a new stadium and they're really playing well, blah, blah, blah. They were fourth. They were in the fourth tier at the time as well. I said, okay, that's great. So I had to do some work to figure out how to get a response out of somebody at Rot-Weiss Essen, and that took a while. And finally, they came back and they said, "Oh, we're really glad you're interested in investing in a German club, but we don't have the ability to take an equity investor. As you may or may not be aware, some clubs have structured themselves so they can accept equity investment. Other clubs have not. They're still 100% owned by the Verein." And they said, just, when we get to the Erste Bundesliga, then you give us a call. I thought that was a little bit of a rude response.
I would tend to
So
agree.
I went back to my cousin and said, okay. And I looked at the table. So I knew what the answer would be, but who's the number one, rival to Rot-Weiss Essen? And Preußen Münster. And so in fact, Preußen, we got promoted 2 seasons ago from the Regionalliga. Essen got promoted the year before purely on goal difference. So we were fighting for years. So I went back and said, okay, how am I going to do this? And I just literally sent an email to the CFO at the time and said, I'm an American guy. I have German roots close by, blah, blah, blah. And I'd like to discuss potentially investing in your club. Years later, I learned what that email did. So apparently the CFO gets the email. He's thinking, is this a scam? Is this some kind of, I don't understand. So he then starts going to various members on the supervisory board. And he went to the president finally. He said, what am I supposed to do with this? And he looked at him and said, well, reply. and we started a long set of conversations that wound up with me making a pretty small investment to start. I liked what I heard, but I wanted to see for real, right? Because I've learned how important the culture and the decision-making bits are. In Germany, you're probably aware, the structure is such that if I put in $100 billion, I don't have $100 billion, not even close. But if I put $100 billion, I still wouldn't have the control because of the 50+1. So I really needed to figure out how it worked in more than just having some Zoom meetings and some in-person meetings. So I made that initial investment, like I said, I guess it was before the last season in the Regionalliga 3 years ago.
You touched upon there in terms of the limited scope of control, so to speak, you can have as an investor. And obviously, given that tradition governed landscape of German football, we've had a lot of cases in which DFB, etc., Bundesliga tried to welcome outside investment, and there has been large protests within that. With you then, and excuse the forthcomingness, but you coming out as an outsider, as an American, into a German club, how have you found that response? How was that for you, basically going into Preußen Münster?
So it's been fantastic. First of all, it's a great opportunity. I am semi-fluent in German because that's what we spoke when I was a child in the house.
Mm-hmm.
My cousin that I've referred to multiple times is also an investor. Usually when I'm at the ground, he's there too. So he can explain the whole story. And people then they start to get it and say, okay, I will say I'm not the typical American sports investor, particularly from a German context. And One of the reasons, not one, the main reason that I invested in Preußen, aside from all of the, emotionally positive things, is we've got just a fantastic leadership team. And I don't, people say, well, 50 plus one, you don't control anything. And I'm like, well, okay, that's fine. But if you have a management team and you have a Verein that are all aligned, what am I going to control? What do I want to control? Nothing. I want guys making, I'm all about making smart decisions. I was a management consultant for 20 years. My work was helping companies make smarter decisions so that they can improve their business. That's all I want to do. And so some of our newer, so we now, North Americans, I say that because we have a Canadian investor in the group. We own nearly 20% of the equity capital in the KGAA, which is the capital raising entity within the club. And they all ask me, well, how much influence do we have? How much influence do we have? I said, it's really simple. If I come up with a stupid idea and I tell it to Markus, another Markus, who is our CFO and co-CEO, if I come up with a stupid idea, he can ignore me. And the good news is that's the right thing to do.
Right.
He has no obligation to listen to me. If I come up with a good idea and I can help him with something, he's totally open to it. And that's one of the ways, for example, we, built this was a project we did last summer to get on about 15 or so new North American investors into Preußen. So I think that's how it should work, right? You need to have alignment along the whole business. I always look back at 1860 München and how they had a situation where, best I could tell, they got relegated twice in a week because the owner who thought he could control everything and the Verein were so misaligned that finally they just got into a bit of a tiff that at the end of the day did nothing more than almost kill the club. We don't, that's not what I want. I'm super aligned with what the club's trying to do. I'm super happy to be part of it. And, there's a couple places where I can throw my, what we would say, throw in your 2 cents and help the club along. It's ideal.
What is your vision for Preußen? And I ask because we're seeing now football clubs being identified as these underutilized business assets from a commercial entertainment perspective, even. And we're seeing also evolution of what a club can mean from a branding standpoint, merchandise, fan engagement. Within that larger context, what is your vision for Preußen? And does that overlap with any of the things that I mentioned in terms of what a football club can represent, what it can be within, the world of football that we're in currently?
So Preußen, and I am going to talk about semi-ancient history, but this is all third, fourth party. So if I get some of my facts wrong, the audience will forgive me. But Preußen, first of all, was a founding member of the Bundesliga in 1963, I believe. Founding member of the Bundesliga, lasted one whole year, went down. They had some pretty rough patches between 1963 and the current state. 5-6 years ago, maybe I have the timing wrong, they sort of decided to restructure the board, restructure management, and take a much more purposeful push. And now we are executing our strategy. So as you mentioned, we are in the process of rebuilding 3/4 of our stadium. We will dramatically expand our capacity, and not only expand our capacity, but increase the mix of areas for corporate hospitality and private boxes and things of that sort. That revenue is critical. That revenue allows us to keep the tickets for our hardcore day-to-day fans, relatively affordable. So that's a huge project that's underway. We are just completing the licensing of our academy and developing a capability to pursue advanced analytics and recruiting. We are improving our marketing and our merchandising. We just opened a brand new shop in downtown Münster, huge, and the merchandise has been flying off the shelf. So it's, we don't have plans to play rugby in our stadium or do stuff like that. What we have plans of doing is using all of the best practices of successful clubs everywhere to improve eventually our playing position. You're right, we were in a relegation fight this year. Not surprising, quite frankly. And if we go down, we go down and we keep fighting. It's weird because, again, everybody's asking, well, what if they go down? What if they go down? Isn't that horrible? And it's like, well, we don't want to go down. Let's be really clear. And we in the team are doing everything possible to avoid that. And I'm still pretty confident. I mean, we have been in the safety zone for, most of the calendar year, and every week melts another chance for the chasers to catch us. So I'm confident with that, but it's more about the long-term view. I think, in the next 5 years, when the new stadium's in, when the revenue associated with that comes in, and it's already starting to come in, for example, in our new naming rights partner that we just signed, we're going to be contending for the first Bundesliga. I don't want to be too bold, or maybe my colleagues will shoot me, but I don't see why not. The Münster as a town, for those who've never been to Münster, is a gorgeous town. It's a university town. The income levels of the people that live in Münster are higher than the German average. The age of the people in Münster is lower than the German average, which means our next generation of fans is already growing up for us. It's got a very, very strong, Mittelstand corporate presence. And those are the guys that they love to buy a box. They love to sponsor us. I mean, and the support from the community has been fantastic. So it literally is, in my opinion, a perfect situation with a management team that I think is doing all the right things to get us to maximize what that potential can give us.
Yeah, and why not? We've seen Heidenheim, Holstein Kiel, the likes that show that it is possible. I could speak on this forever, but I want to, as I'm trying to fit it all in, but I want to, just towards the end here, I want to just touch upon the new USL club in which you are a founding partner. One thing is obviously investing into a club. Another is starting a new club. We could have had an entire episode about just this and how it would look like operationally, logistically, etc. Just give us a brief insight into what some of the key pillars that are needed to start and launch a new football club.
Well, number one, Rob Moreno and Daniel Mildenberg and his brother Mark Mildenberg are the three sort of drivers of the club. You need a good team. I'll keep coming back to it. Every successful football club has a great leadership team, and those three guys are doing a fantastic job. They made a decision. Usually in a day-to-day, there aren't too many huge decisions, but they made a huge decision because when we applied for the franchise rights, it was the autumn of 23, and the league was hot to get us to start in the spring of 24. We have a season that runs counter to normal football season, but who knows, that might get changed. And the guys, and I agreed, we said, no, we're going to take our time. And that was the biggest decision we could have made, because that allowed us to build a brand that allowed us to reach out to the community. So by the time we actually had our first match, which was now a month ago, we had lined up sponsors. We had sold a ton of season cards. We had everything was in place to have a roaring start. Our crowds have been great. We are still undefeated,
So I
including
saw.
pressing to the third round of the cup. So it's just been a nice story. But it's again, when we say football and business, some people think, oh my God, you're gonna rape the club, take all the money. No.
Mhm.
What my version of football and business is business like deliberate decision making. Make good decisions. Everything else is gonna come out well. And I'm not going to make a huge return, and I don't care. I'm also, I'm not here to, contribute charity. I got charities I contribute to. They're not
Mhm.
football club. And it just, I don't know. To me, it's a very simple model. Now, a lot of clubs don't follow it. A lot of clubs think they know better. A lot of clubs will tell you, oh, you don't understand how it works here. And they're all wrong, in
Mhm.
my opinion.
Well, I mean, success as you can as is evident, and Orient even for that matter in terms of the journey you've been on there and where they are now competing for the playoffs in League One, considering that they were outside the league system not many years ago. Just towards the very end, I want to have a few quick fire questions as such.
Sure.
I want to start with what you have not done that you would like to do within sports.
So I have done it, but I want to do it again. Let me rephrase that, right?
Yeah.
In Joliet, I owned 80% of the club. I could do whatever the hell I wanted, and all the burden was on me. At Orient and in Munster, I am a minority owner, which is
Hmm.
fine. But I think I want to buy and control another club in Europe in football. So that's on my list. I have to find the right place.
Hmm.
Something tells me I don't have enough of a bank account to play in a top league, but either a smaller country or a lower level side in a larger country is on my list.
Brilliant. What club do you most admire in terms of how it's run as a business, as a club?
Boy, it's hard for me to argue with Brentford. I
Hmm.
always think of Brentford and Orient as, twin brothers separated at birth, similar kinds of, demographics in their market, roughly similar table positions over the decades, and what Mr. Benham has done and what the team has done is just fantastic. So that's my quick answer.
And just lastly, we talk a lot about the impact, the effect that the World Cup in 2026 in the US will have. What do you think? What effect do you think that will have for soccer in America?
I, I think it will have a big impact, but football here is growing crazy. I mean, Messi, for example, has had a big impact.
Hmm.
Uh, the coverage of the Premier League, which is extensive here, has had a big impact. Naples, we talk about Naples. One of the things that we found when we were doing our due diligence is Naples, Florida, which is not a really large community, has like top 15 viewership of Premier League matches, for example.
Hmm.
So it's growing. It's gonna put it even further. What I think will be very helpful is if Mr. Pochettino can get our national side to not look like idiots as we have been most recently. Um, but I think it's adding fuel to a fire that's already burning pretty brightly. I think I think hopefully it will spur. So the USL, which is the league that Naples is in, has said they will institute a promotion and relegation system,
Hmm.
uh, which would be huge. Not easy to pull off because we have teams from one end of the country to the other. But I think if this pushes that forward faster, I think that would be a huge boost too.
Well, fingers crossed for a successful World Cup for the US, obviously in their home country, and also for Germany. Thank you so much, Nick. There's so much we could discuss. Maybe we could do a part two in Münster and with the new look stadium and what comes with it. But for now, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time and joining the Fussball channel.
Thank you, Markus, for your time. It was a fun chat.